So I've gone into a little bit about what proactivism means to me as somebody who came from a branch of activism that is very much in the popular consciousness. I come from the police accountability movement. You may know it as something else, but as a survivor of the kind of violence that the state inflicts, there was pretty much no choice for me. When that came down the pike, the sides were drawn. However, I realized that I care about something much larger than that. That is the planet. And we have to consider that our human problems are pretty much null and void if there's no oxygen to argue about it. And that's where the shift was for me. And proactivism means to me stepping into solving problems and solution-oriented thinking informed by the problem that made you mad in the first place. That's what proactivism means to me. Julie, how you doing? Good to see you. What is that? What does proactivism mean to you?
Proactivism means it's constantly learning, as you said. It's constantly learning how to solve the problem. And first, it is not being afraid to try something new, not being afraid to take that knowledge, that information, and finding something new. When I first started getting involved in plastic pollution, it was in 2012. I saw a Sinopec, which is an oil company, a cargo ship that had carrying nurdles, plastic nurdles that had spilled. I was living in Hong Kong at the time. It had spilled in a typhoon. And I thought, oh, well, they're going to come back and clean it up like an oil spill. But then I learned once it's converted into plastic, they're not accountable for cleaning it up or responsible for cleaning it up. And I thought, oh, that is outrageous. I'm going out. Oil companies are bad. I have to raise awareness. I had the opportunity of using the film A Plastic Ocean to raise awareness. And so I know nothing about film distribution, but I was like, I'm going to do this. This is my job. So it was trying something new and really figuring out what to do. And I thought that's what proactivism means to me. But over time, I also then realized it's not so black and white that you can blame people. So I think proactivism means not being afraid to change the narrative, changing your actions, and really realizing it's not who's to blame, finding it, being the victim, but it is how do we change the narrative? How do I really create something different in order to solve that problem, which is, for me, ending plastic pollution.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for that. And so, Mareesa, you are in charge of something that I think works on the inner world in a specific way. And when we talked before, your proactivism was very, very eye-opening. And I want you to share your story on what proactivism means to you.
Sure. Ooh, look at that. It just turns itself on. Awesome. Hi, thank you. For me, proactivism is very much about coming to things from a grounded, deep truth. And so I come to today's conference because I'm a steward of the Global Psychedelic Society. So I'm not in charge. I'm but a steward. And the Global Psychedelic Society is a grassroots, decentralized community of leaders that are here to support other leaders in providing the world with education, integration, and safety around psychedelic use, which for those of you not so familiar, psychedelics are helping address the mental crisis, helping us find our own center, helping us ground. And so when it comes to proactivism, I'm very interested in how do we do this in a sustainable way? I find that is much more easily accomplished when we are coming grounded and centered in our own truth, and when we are not operating our own unconscious programming and conditioning that we have inherited just, by being born. You're born, you receive the beliefs and values and programming of your environment, of your caregivers, of your society, culture, religion, of capitalism, of everything that teaches us how to consume. And in order for us to be effective proactivists, I think we need to have awareness around that. And this is one of the things that psychedelics is really good at doing.
It's amazing. Thank you very much for that. So we have a resident trash talker here. Absolutely. Right, boots and all. I was like, she defines trash talk in a way that I've never heard it before. So, Stacy, can you tell us about the kind of trash you talk and what that does to lend itself to proactivism in your work?
Sure. Hey, y'all, Stacy Savage, Texas Trash Talker here. I'm going to tell a story quickly.
Tell a story.
So when I first started on environmental issues in Texas, in the conservative stronghold that is this state, we went after some pretty big names. I did door-to-door grassroots community organizing. I've talked to tens of thousands of Texans on their front doorstep over the course of 9 years with a nonprofit here based in the Austin area. And I had these conversations with people, and I was categorizing these big companies that were doing the polluting. We were going after e-waste, and the largest employer in Central Texas, I'm sure you can imagine who that is around electronics. We went after them because we knew we needed a statewide piece of legislation that put the onus back on the company. But what we did is, and I found this out later once I started my zero waste consulting firm, is that the companies are made of people. The people live in our community. They cherish our community. It's not this nefarious corporation that's doom and gloom. There are people behind it, the administration, the finance officer, all the workers, the cafeteria employees that make the operation run. So it was a very big switch for me mentally to understand that these are not nefarious corporations. They are run by people, and sometimes those people who run the corporations need a little guidance. So as I started my consulting firm, I got to see the other side of the coin, and I got to be more proactive in my activism by assisting those people who operate those companies from the inside out. I wasn't on the outside pointing fingers and shaming anymore. I was on the inside helping up and down, left to right, side to side, diagonally, wherever I could to make sure that their operations were running in an optimized way, so that they could save money, that they could empower their employees, they could drive a green marketing edge. And so it was a very big shift for me. That was 12 years ago. And it still is so inspiring to be able to see on the inside those people who really, really, really want to do the right thing and empower them to do that with the services that our company provides. So it's exciting.
That's amazing. She found out, like I did, there's no Lex Luthors in cigar smoke-filled rooms planning to destroy our lives actively. There's people who we would have passed in the grocery store and not thought twice. Very important stuff. Glenn, my friend, your organization's name is so cool, Mighty Earth. Indeed, it is. And I wanted to kind of hear about your mighty journey into understanding the power of proactivism.
Thank you. Those all very inspiring. I can't wait to learn more. For me, proactivism, activism in general, starts with a vision of the world that we want to create. Hopefully it's a positive, beautiful vision. For us, we work to protect nature. We work to protect endangered species and bring wildlife abundance back to the world. I was in the Everglades on vacation last year. It's a really unique, wonderful wilderness, extensive wilderness. It's teeming with wildlife in a way that is very rare in our world today. We saw bobcats, we had dolphins playing in the wake of our boat, dozens of alligators, wood storks, ospreys. It was so beautiful. And you rarely, even when you see wilderness and wildlife, you really get a sense of that abundance that was once common in the world. So for me, that's, I even though my organization, my work, and my career has often taken on really hard fights against big corporations that are destroying rainforests, that are sending tons of pollution into the atmosphere, we know we're working for something beautiful. I think to everything there is a season, and right now I feel both very proactivist and also very much in a fight. And I'll give you the two sides to that. We've been working. We are one of our flagship campaign is transforming the meat industry to break the link between agricultural expansion and deforestation by channeling work onto the world's 1.6 billion acres of previously deforested land instead of onto native ecosystems. We've had great success in Southeast Asia and Africa. We've brought down commercially driven deforestation 90%. We know it's possible, and yet there's big meat companies that have resisted that. The largest in the world is JBS. And so one of the things over the last 2 years we've been successful in doing is getting the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, to stop their listing on the New York Stock Exchange to stop them from expanding. They gave the largest single donation to the Trump inauguration of $5 million. It's more than any other company, more than the tech companies that got so much attention for their $1 million donations. And last night at 10 p.m., the SEC approved JBS's listing on the IPO. So that's what I've been up to this morning. And I hate losing. I hate losing to people doing evil things. And they're the world's largest deforester. They're cause more climate pollution on their own than the whole country of Spain. So that is something that requires a fight. I think it's a big fight, and indeed, the fight changed from being one focused on this company and SEC civil servants doing their best, and to one that's involved in high politics, affected by high politics in a way that feels very much outside of our control. On the other hand, we're going to keep working on that, and we have a lot of other ways that we're doing that all around the world through companies that are helping us. Some of the JBS and the others' largest customers that are making dramatic progress, bringing new transparency to the meat industry, eliminating deforestation, making great progress. So I still have hope. But the other side of it that I think is really important to me is also, finding ways that you can have a really positive impact. So one of the new things that we're doing in North America is rewilding, bringing back extirpated species. We're starting with mountain lions east of the Mississippi. Texas has lots of mountain lions. We're very lucky, blessed to have them. But in the east, there's been a century of forest regrowth. White-tailed deer were extinct a century ago, almost extinct a century ago, which is mind-blowing. They're now, the management has been so successful that they're now overpopulated and the ecosystems are out of whack. There's Lyme disease, there's chronic wasting disease. And so we've started something that seems I think to many people challenging, is to bring them back. And we've just been able to raise some money and hire somebody to start an initiative in the Northeast to bring them back there and bring back balance to the ecosystem. So I think having positive work that balances those hard fights is incredibly important.
Absolutely. The fighting spirit doesn't go anywhere. It's about what you do with that energy. And so I find that when you're shifting paradigms, it's often easier to do when you have an example, somebody that creates the framework that you can at least mimic. Humans are great mimics. It's what we do. And so I was wondering if there was heroes in proactivism that embodied the ideal, not necessarily your work, but the ideal of it. And as I was thinking about this, asking them these questions, I think I want to start with a little story in this. Somebody who embodied the ideal under extreme circumstances. I mean extreme. And I'll do a little story from my neck of the woods. When I was 12 years old, we had what's called the Summer of Violence. Gang activity had kicked up to an all-time high. My mother was shopping for clothes that were not either red or blue to make sure that I was not mistaken for any side of the gang war that was going on around me in an act of violence. And one of the main purveyors of it was a blood named Showbiz. This is going to go somewhere, trust me. Showbiz was 5 years older than me. I was 12, he was 17. And his name rang like Tupac was actually in our neighborhood. That's how feared this guy was, a warrior, right? That we looked up to. Anyway, he ended up doing 10 years Fed time. Fast forward 18 years. There's a guy named T-Rob in my neighborhood who starts this thing called the Prodigal Son Initiative. And what it does is it takes gang members from either side, Blood or Crip, don't matter. And he's like, we're all in the same gang. We're going to dress ourselves in camouflage. And it wasn't like army camouflage. It was like orange, neutral colors, the same kind that my mom had me shopping in. And I finally meet T-Rob, and everybody was like, yo, that's showbiz, bro. T-Rob's name was Terrence Roberts. He wouldn't let you call him by that name. But in the height of his program, he had 400 young people in his facility away from the streets, and was so good at funneling these young folks into trades if they couldn't get a degree, and funneling these young folks into GED programs if they had dropped out of high school, that we saw a measurable decrease in the gang activity in Denver, Colorado. He had earned the street credibility to get their attention and know that he was somebody to be listened to, and he commanded that energy in the correct direction. That's proactivism. Terrence Roberts embodied that ideal of taking something that was unbelievably difficult and channeling it into something that was positive without standing against somebody. He just stood for something, and the young people stood with him. That's my example of the proactive ideal. How about yours? Do you have any? I'm just going to go right down the line, Drew.
Sorry,
yeah,
no problem.
yeah.
An ideal. I'm just going to give you my evolution of how I started this Plastic Oceans using film. I thought of, change came with, if I tell you the problem, you're going to be as activated as I am, and the world's going to change. I really believed in that top-down education. Like, if you see the animals suffering, entangled, human health, we're being polluted, I thought if I shared that with the world, I show you enough films, you're automatically going to figure this out on your own. And I believed that. And then with the first 8 years of Plastic Oceans, I'm showing films, I'm talking to people, but the conversation always stayed, well, it's the Chinese fault, right? But if America did this, we wouldn't have this problem. If America didn't consume this much, we wouldn't have this problem. Oh, or if you had these conversations in the U.S., well, isn't really the dirtiest places down in Latin America or in Asia? It's not really our problem. Or, the organization's called Plastic Oceans, and the idea is like, yeah, we don't want it to end up in the ocean. But the number of talks I would have in the middle of America, that would be, well, is it really our problem? This is an ocean's problem. We don't even see the ocean. And every time I thought, gosh, these films are not resonating the way I want. And and the conversations that were being had after the film were just much more different. And I thought, okay, well, then we're going to pivot this. It's not about ending plastic pollution. This is about building sustainable communities. I thought everybody has to address plastic pollution differently. And I thought, okay, well, this is where the sustainability goals come into place. We have to educate about SDGs and sustainability. But then that didn't seem to resonate with the material management of plastic and what circular economy is. I couldn't see how all of this aligned. And then I came across Kate Rayworth, and she invented donut economics. And what this is, it's in parallel or complements circular economy, but it ends up really, how do we start to rethink economic systems? I mean, we still need business models. We still need social economics. And at the core of her economic model is really local needs, which we can't forget. And in this big circular economy, we think of if we produce it well, we distribute it well, we collect it well, we regenerate, we make sure the materials are great. All of that is great, but what about humans, local community needs? How do we make sure we actually have real access to basic clean water and food? And when I say real access, it shouldn't be challenging. And a community engagement, community voice, trust in our community. I mean, it really starts down at the community level. And this is where I started thinking about, this is what made me think about film distribution differently. It's not about the film and me making a film, me finding films and giving them to you and hoping you change. It's about how people watching it, participants engage on it, the conversation. And so what I created was a new model on how to record those discussions, to foster and facilitate better discussions so that we can start seeing that change. And that really came from Kate Rayworth, really pulling together circular economy and local community needs together.
Kate Rayworth. I got to look her up. Google AI. Who's Kate Rayworth? No. But seriously, so that she's your beacon. Mareesa, who's your beacon? The person who embodies the ideal of proactivism for you.
I really appreciate this focus on community being key here, and empowering each of us to be an active part of the solution. I have a couple of heroes, so I'll just weave them into this. But until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. This is Carl Jung. Until we are aware of all the conditioning that we've received, it runs the show. It runs us like a computer program. And this is what psychedelics help us become aware of. But right now in the psychedelic ecosystem, all of the efforts, all of the community is very much focused towards legalization, medicalization, yet 95% of psychedelic use is happening in the underground and in the festivals and in the communities. And so our work here is to really support community to step into leadership and into self-accountability and start to become a part of the solution by peer support and gathering and being empowered themselves. So my hero here is Anne Shulgin, who is the wife of Sasha Shulgin. And Sasha Shulgin is the chemist who was responsible for synthesizing MDMA and using it for MDMA therapy, as well as 2CB and quite a handful of other compounds. And this is the couple that really spearheaded the idea of how do psychedelics work with therapeutic processes to help us become conscious of the unconscious and to help us become aware of all the programming and conditioning that is embedded in us, so that we can operate outside of it from a sovereign place, and that when we are creating solutions to problems like the environmental catastrophes and the meta crisis that we're all looking at right now, we are not coming to those solutions from a fear-based, scarcity-based, consumerist, extractive, all the things that we are recipients of growing up, that those are not embedded into our solutions so that we can think outside of the box and come up with better solutions.
Thank you very much. Stacy, when you think about a hero of proactivism, they don't have to be necessarily in your field, but who embodies the ideal of solving the problem actively without having to stand against or demonize somebody? Who is that for you?
I have two.
Okay, let's
And
go.
they are sheroes, not
Okay.
heroes. And
Shout out
one
to the
just
shero.
walked in the room, and her name is Bridget Shea, and she is a county commissioner for Travis County down in Austin.
Oh my God.
And she is speaking next, and y'all need to stick around for that, please.
Okay.
So Bridget Shea has a, 40-year history of environmental activism. And she led at Clean Water Action. She was the spearhead of Save Our Springs Ordinance, the entire movement in Austin to save Barton Springs. And she did work to, y'all were up until like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning at City Hall to pass the ordinance to Save Our Springs, which is the gem of the entire city of Austin. It runs straight through the city, and she's been on city council in Austin. She's now a county commissioner. Bridget just is the epitome of standing for something and bringing everybody along with her because she's so charismatic. My second shero is Robin Schneider, who is just as active, and she was the 25-year executive director of Texas Campaign for the Environment, which is the nonprofit where I did a lot of door-to-door work before I founded my zero waste consulting firm. And Robin helped me find my voice. Now, I knew I always had the gift of gab. I was slinging fajitas and margaritas at Mexican restaurants. I knew my customer base. I could do the customer service thing. I could talk to anyone about anything, no matter where you stood on the political spectrum. I could find common ground with you and do it in a fun way. I love to laugh. But Robin helped me channel my anger from the 2004 elections, whenever it was handed to Bush. And I was extremely pissed off about that. And I was able to channel my anger around that into actual community activism, getting out there and knocking on those doors and talking to people and finding that common ground. Now, Robin's approach was guerrilla, street theater, protesting, which was a lot of fun. Making those signs. I became an expert sign maker to hold up in the back of City Hall. And press conferences. She taught me how to do a press conference and how to write a press release and get the media out there to turn out to the state capitol so that we could build the public perception and build the education and knowledge around the campaigns that we were going after, such as the computer take-back law in 2007, where we got a unanimous vote from the House and the Senate to pass e-waste take-back legislation in Texas.
That's a unicorn event. That does not happen, but it happened for you. Go.
Remember when I said there's a conservative stronghold in Texas? I meant the legislature. And also, we repeated that victory in 2011 because we passed another bill for take-back for TVs. And this was after the analog to digital switch, 2009, 2010. Think about all those analog TVs that went to the landfill because we didn't have something set up. So now in Texas, manufacturers like Dell and Apple and Panasonic, they have to take back their electronics, recycle them responsibly and for free for Texans.
Wow. Shout out to the Sheroes. Apparently we got Sheroes to be, Sheroes in the making all over. This is wonderful. Thank you very much. Brother Glenn, you've heard a lot right now. Who inspires you in the ideal of proactivism, regardless of the field that they're in?
So actually, I was going to also mention somebody in the room, Bill Shireman.
Bill.
Who no, but I think really does embody this, and it's appropriate that he's convening us here today.
Seriously.
Because there was a tradition of environmentalists criticizing, attacking companies for egregious behavior, deforestation, pollution, etc. And at that time, companies, I think, generally were just annoyed, defensive, angry. Their instinct was not to look at what they could do to solve it, and it was unimaginable to most environmentalists that they could actually go and talk to these arch villains in the smoke-filled room and try to persuade them and try to bring solutions, try to bring their wisdom and insight. And I think Bill had the perspective and the courage to try and bring them together, and succeeded in getting one of, or if not the first, dialogue and major agreement with Mitsubishi to stop deforestation that they were connected to, and other companies. And so he really set a precedent that inspired a whole field of proactivism. I was able to learn from that and take it to help solve the challenge of vast deforestation, initially for palm oil in Southeast Asia. And what we saw was that when you would fly from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur at 30,000 feet in a jet, look out the window, you'd see no other organism except palm oil plantations. That was over rainforest that once was filled with orangutans and rhinoceroses, Sumatran tigers, tree kangaroos. And the conventional wisdom was that there's nothing you could do about it because the market for it was all in developing Asian countries that were mostly concerned about the price, and environment sustainability wasn't high on the list. And so we wanted to change this, and we identified the single company that we thought had the leverage to do that, which was this giant the largest Asian agribusiness called Wilmar International. Ethnically Chinese company, sold mostly to China. They had driven the destruction of millions of acres of rainforest. And the conventional wisdom was that they could not be changed. They were inherently and unalterably evil and greedy and unenlightened and unreachable. We thought we had to try. And so we partly launched a campaign around the world, and we went on TV, and we had organizers and activists in Michigan go up to Kellogg's, their joint venture partners, and say they don't want to work with them as long as they're destroying Tony the Tiger's Sumatran tiger cousin's habitat. But also, because of that, I had the opportunity to go meet with the CEO of this company. Wow. And, I thought more or less he had done some really bad things. And, but when I was on TV, he reached out to me and was very defensive. But I said, look, you've been such a huge part of Asia's economic success. It's time to be part of its ecological healing. And he invited me to come to Singapore and meet with him. Then I got there. His name is Kwok Kong Hong. And he yelled at me for 15 minutes about how unfair NGOs' attacks were. But then, once he got that off his chest, he was actually amazingly open-minded. And we talked for 3 hours. He took me out to lunch. He acted like my Chinese uncle. And his staff were, had their jaws on the floor that he was so open-minded. And we came with concrete solutions a la Bill, and I talked to Bill at the time about what was going on and got his advice. And we were able to bring in some consultants who had practical expertise, how they could expand their company without destroying rainforests. And it was hard. It was hard fought, but he was open-minded. And ultimately, within 6 months, he had announced the strongest forest and human rights policy in the world. Wow. With that momentum, we and our allies got the entire rest of the industry to do the same. And now we've seen a 90% decline in deforestation. And while I'm proud of the work that we did, I actually think we had somebody who was open-minded, ultimately, who nobody imagined was. And
wow.
I had to discover that, we had to discover that, and it opened up a whole world of possibility.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing. Clap for that. Well, not only was that story inspiring, not only do I want to grow up to be all of you, but I found that there are things called tree kangaroos, which I need to look up immediately because those are two words I didn't think belonged together. Wow.
I did not know about them either until we started working on this. Right. And they are kangaroos that live in trees. What? They live in the island of New Guinea and northern Australia, and they are absolutely adorable.
They sound adorable. They sound arboreal kangaroos, guys. Listen. Only at EarthX. This is so cool because I'm sitting here with folks who've all made impacts that never necessarily made the front page of New York Times. There wasn't a cover story. They didn't broadcast their commercial at the Super Bowl, though they should have. But this is encouraging that the work that's being done, the good that's being done, may not always have a spotlight on it, but it definitely matters, especially to the tree kangaroos. Now, my next question, and I'm just going to leave this open to you all because you know this better than I would. What is the future of proactivism in your specific field? I want you to dial into your profession, dial into your work. What is the future of proactivism in your work? And maybe I'll put a second one on that. Where is it needed most going forward in the future? I'll start with you. Hi, Julie. What's going on?
So after listening to all of these very inspiring people and all the work that you're doing, the common thing that I always hear with activists, it's the ability to listen to others, to find the common ground, to look past that initial knee-jerk reaction of, oh, why are they attacking me? Getting past the blame, getting into a corporate room and, trying to get them to see your side or vice versa. And that's the hard part. The hard part is having that conversation, going back, listening long enough to negotiate, manage, and keep pushing. We need, in my world, I was like, how do we make every citizen this way? How do we take this skill set and give it more to everyone? So in my profession is film distribution. How do we get more film impact? How do I get what I want? And when I say impact, I want action. I want communities to be activated and actually change, right? How do I systematically help facilitate their conversations so that they become activists? And with what I've designed was the participatory film impact model.
Wow.
And what this is that you watch a film, you criticize you learn from it, criticize it, talk about it, but you record it. These discussions are recorded. And we systematically review that, and they're all going to be, there's going to be a lot of emotion, but that doesn't necessarily translate to action. But there are lots of these nuanced knowledge gaps and barriers that can be pulled out to be highlighted so that we can facilitate a better conversation the next time. And to give you an example, because Adam here, we just finished up our master's, and my master's was focused on this model. And I focused on it in Chile, and we had 5 different stakeholder groups: local business people, local university students, and local municipality government representatives. And they all watched the same film, but they all pulled out different discussions. And then we found collaborative opportunities for them to come together and to build the trust to keep activating and moving towards the Chilean National Circular Economy Plan.
Goodness gracious. Most artists are very sensitive about their stuff. She said, I'm going to open it up because it's bigger than the art. It's about the action you take from it. That's proactive. That's awesome. Mareesa, in your work, where is proactivism probably needed the most moving forward into the future?
So right now, mental health isn't something most people prioritize until after a crisis, right? The future I hold is one where we start looking at mental health not only when it comes to crisis, but ahead of time. And how do we create a culture that looks at mental health as a quest and an adventure, where our obstacles are here to help us grow, and that we equip ourselves for this quest at the beginning when we're children, and that emotional intelligence is there at the beginning. So being that that's a longer running solution, and people are working on that. Right now, the Global Psychedelic Society, we have 300 network, 300 communities around the world. They're not chapters, they're decentralized. And we're really holding a vision where they have a brick and mortar location where anyone who is looking for education around psychedelic use can go into this brick and mortar space and be surrounded by folks who are working with it, who can provide them with everything they need to make educated decisions, and the community to work on it with, because as we're seeing, mental health is also such an issue when we're in isolation. That is a huge part of the problem, and that community is the medicine, and that this not be gatekept by big pharma, which is the thing that we're kind of running into, and that this instead sit in the hands of community who's feeling empowered to provide it for each other.
Amazing. Community is the medicine. Proactive action means that they don't get to control the substances that actually open our consciousness, but it stays in the hands of the folks who need it the most. Very good stuff. Our trash talker. What's going on, Stacy?
Hey, well, I think companies are finally starting to look at their waste as a resource. And so they're finding cash in their trash, guys.
Cash and come on now.
Yep.
Let's go.
And it's all about managing the resources more responsibly. So when you have 14 tons of cardboard and you send it to a recycler or to the landfill, you're paying money to cart that off your property. The recycler is making money off of your materials that you've already brought into your business. Now, if you can bale all that cardboard because maybe you leased a compactor and a baler and you've got that equipment on site, you get to put that on a trailer and you get to sell it for $70 a ton in Texas. Maybe it's $160 a ton in New York. It's regional pricing. So yeah, you can build revenue streams with your waste materials. And we're not calling it waste anymore. These are highly valuable material discards. And they are resources to build revenue for businesses. Aluminum, copper, you think about all the metals on the materials marketplace. These are commodities that needed to be exchanged and build revenue off of. And so companies are finally starting to understand, oh, so the things that I purchase and we use within our business, I'm paying for once, and then I'm paying for it twice because I have to put it in a dumpster where my hauler comes and services that dumpster and pulls it off. So I'm paying for all of our materials that come in and out twice. And so I want to make sure that these companies understand that not only can you make revenue from your resources, you can drive a green marketing edge that most companies overlook.
Okay. I don't know anything else you can buy that weighs a ton for $70, but I learned something new today. Brother Glenn, looks like we're under our time crunch right now, so sir,
Very concise.
I don't want you to be brief, but go ahead and be concise.
What's the question?
The question is, what is the future of proactivism in your field? What's it look like?
I think it's a challenging moment for the environment, and it feels like a very reactive moment right now. We had this the United States' largest marine national monument that President Bush created just opened up for commercial fishing for no reason. So there's a lot of terrible things that are coming down and attacks, and I do think that even amidst this time, we not only have to keep a vision of a better world before us to inspire us and keep working towards it, we have to actually find ways that one can practically pursue those. For us, that's rewilding, but I think it's working with the private sector, it's working with government, it's working in communities ultimately. Community is the medicine, as you just said, and I think that's what I've always found. And there are wins and victories and progress that can happen even amidst great challenge and trouble. And so we have to keep that in mind even when it's really, really hard, when it's really hard to do, and it's really hard to think about.
Absolutely. Good folks, give this panel a round of applause. The future is here, and the heroes are all around us. And you might be one of them. My name is Theo E.J. Wilson. Thank you for coming to the Circular Economy Summit. Thank you.